whether it's whatever it is, people will often want information before they do business with you. What's interesting though, if you offer the information first via educational media in some way, shape or form, they will often skip the information altogether and go straight to the product or service. Hey everyone, my name is Dr. Rieder, and it is an absolute pleasure to be presenting to you today wherever you are in the world. And unfortunately, it's not live like we all would like, but sometimes the universe creates challenges for us to innovate and move and do things differently, and maybe this message reaches more people or reaches you in a place that maybe you weren't able to be at the event, etc. So this might be the blessing that you needed, and this message might be the blessing that you needed. So welcome to the presentation today. I am currently in the United Kingdom, and those of you who don't know me, my name is Dr. Rieder. I own and operate 8 practices here in the United Kingdom. I've been blessed to share the stage with people like Les Brown and T. Harv Eker and Robert Kiyosaki and people like that. And today I'm going to be teaching you how to effectively communicate, the value of chiropractic, which is, in a time like now, I can honestly say that potentially the human race had never ever needed us more, or needed us to have the ability or the skill set to reach more people than it does right now. Because there are so many people out there right now that need our message desperately. Right now, that if you are someone in your community that is giving a message of hope, you will naturally attract those people to you that you want to serve. And that's the goal. The goal is to serve more people. So I hope you enjoy it. Let me start by saying thank you to you for being here. I always say that the secret to success is show up. I don't know if you know this, but consumption of virtual presentations is very, very, very low. Most people don't have the discipline to sit down and watch a presentation like this. And if you're watching this right now, that puts you in a different level straight away. So thanks for watching this presentation. I know that and that sounds woo-woo, but just you being on the presentation will have an effect on your life and the people that you can communicate with. It was interesting. I had this topic designed way before COVID-19, and it certainly changed the dynamics of what I'm going to teach today. Simply with the world being what it is today, communication, right? So I think it's interesting to understand the definition of communication before we continue. The definition of effectively communicating is understanding that communication is a process of an idea or a concept moving across space and being received by another person who is concentrating enough to receive it and then understand the communication. Let me run through that again. The process of communication is the process of, it should come on your screen now, an idea or concept going across a distance to a receiver with the intention that it reaches the receiver, and the receiver must be paying attention so that they can understand the communication process happening. It's a bit of a mouthful, I know, but it's going to be relevant throughout my teachings. And I'm going to break down those steps for you today so that you can reach more people, because ultimately that's all we're trying to do. One of the things I always like to say is often within chiropractic, we often talk about going back to our roots. And if you do go back to your roots, if you do go back to the roots of chiropractic, and I ask you who pretty much communicated chiropractic better than anyone on the planet who's ever lived, it'd be very hard pressed to find anyone more or any other name to come up besides BJ Palmer. And if you look at the way he communicated and the media with which he communicated, he was way above his time. And some of those processes I'm going to cover today. So I'm going to break down the steps that I've just explained to you right now. And the first step being a process. It's the process of an idea or concept going across distance to the receiver. So let's talk about that. Here's what I want you to understand. If you are communicating anything to anybody, you first, as the communicator, need to be clear on the communication. There's an old saying that says, I believe it was Albert Einstein that said, I don't have time to write you a short letter, so I'm going to write you a long one. Meaning that it's so much easier to vomit stuff onto a page without giving it thought and effectively communicating it so that it's received and understood. It's much easier to just spit it out And often that long message might not be understood, but it's easier for the communicator to do it. So the process of communication is a step-by-step process. So my advice to you is whenever you get the opportunity to engage in any type of book or course or lesson to better communicate, grab it with both hands. I know it sounds cheesy, but any book that you can possibly read that helps communication will change your life. You know, it's interesting, Warren Buffett is quoted as saying that the biggest return on investment of any investment he's ever made in his entire life. And you must remember that Warren Buffett, that's all he does for a living, is he measures his return on investment of his investments. In most of the times, it's fiscal investments or financial investments, and then works out the return on investment on that. But when asked the question, what is the biggest return on investment of any investment you've ever made, his answer might surprise you. What he said was a public speaking course he went to many, many years ago. Now, Warren Buffett is not known, although he does communicate to millions of people because he's kind of famous, but that's not his gig. It's not what he does. He's not an orator as a profession like Tony Robbins, but he still said that changed his life more than anything in the world. And the question is, why did that change his life more than anything? Why did that have the biggest return on investment? And I truly believe that when you are a being that does the work, like you're doing now, to communicate the message, that in itself helps you become more influential. Let me say that again. When you are the being that works on yourself, so that you are the being that wants to work hard on yourself and understanding your own internal dialogue, then and only then will you communicate and reach more people. Again, another mouthful, but I hope it sets up the context for this first point. The first point is great communication always starts with yourself first. You know, there's three things that I say that the most successful docs I've ever worked with on the planet, and I help docs all over the world grow their practices. I also have 8 practices myself, and I've worked with probably more associates than anyone on the planet. I humbly say, I may be wrong, but it'll be hard-pressed for you to find anyone that has worked with more. What I would say is that the most successful docs I've ever worked with, from a communication standpoint, have these 3 things in abundance. The first thing is they have massive amounts of energy. Remember that you can never influence the person rather with the most energy will always influence the person with a lower level of energy. And if you are a health practitioner that's wanting to move someone to a higher vibration, you are never going to influence or impact someone's life who has a higher level of energy than you. Remember, let me say that again. If your practice members are coming to you and they are vibrating at a higher level than you, you can have a tough time moving them towards health or higher vibration. So it starts with yourself first. Number 1, make sure you've got great energy. You know, one of the it's a funny quote, if you will, but it's worth mentioning now. It's by Stuart Wilde. Stuart Wilde said this. He said the key to success is to raise your own energy levels, and when you do, people will naturally be attracted to you. And when they show up, build them. And it's a bit of a tongue-in-cheek joke, but there's a lot of truth in that. And it comes from the perspective that people will pay to watch a burning fire. You need to be burning with fire first and foremost. From a communication perspective, when you talk to speak on stage, or when you talk to communicate to small rooms, or when you talk to communicate in any way, shape, or form, they always say that you need to be in the state you want to create. So if you want to move people in the right direction, if you want to move people towards health, most of the communication and all the studies show that most communication is non-verbal. Your body language, your energy levels, how you look after yourself, your state. That's half the communication battle done, is you first and foremost being in the great state. So number 1, energy. Number 2, there is no great chiropractor I've ever worked with that doesn't have this in abundance, and the word is certainty. When 2 human beings interact, the human being with the most certainty will always influence or draw magnetically the other human being towards it in some way, shape, or form, simply because they've got more certainty. There is something super attractive about someone who's passionate about the thing they do, and specifically that comes from certainty. Now, certainty, you know, within chiropractic, it's both our biggest advantage and it's also our biggest disadvantage at times, is our diversity, to the degree that we have our diversity. I mean, when I talk about diversity, I mean, I think, you know, there's over 50 to 100 techniques alone, and there's many different practice styles, and you will get a different practice style depending on where you go on the planet. Now, that is beautiful about the chiropractic profession, because there's no one way to do it, but that's also confusing at times for the consumer. And when we really, really dive into certainty, I want to be clear that you have to find your method with which you find certainty. For most people, I always say, Tony Robbins has a saying, it says success leaves clues. And when I was going through my journey, just so you understand, I went to a chiropractic college where we were taught almost no philosophy, where we were taught we weren't very certain at all. In fact, I was so uncertain about what I wanted to do that when I qualified as a chiropractor, I actually wanted to go do a postgraduate medical degree so that I wasn't a chiropractor. I'll never forget, a lecturer looked me in the eye and said, "Don't do it. This is my final year." He said, "Don't do it. It's too hard to make it." That was the messaging that I got and the communication that I got prior to qualifying. So I needed to go find my certainty. So the biggest lesson I want to tell you right now is, first of all, look to the most successful chiropractors on the planet. I remember a good friend of mine stood on stage once and he said, you'd have to be, excuse my language, you'd have to be an idiot not to put two and two together and understand that all the successful chiropractors on the planet all talk about the same thing, do the same thing, think about the same thing, and it always leads back to some type of grounding in the principles of chiropractic from green books or the 33 principles or whatever it is. So my advice for you is to embrace that and really surround yourself or go all in on that wherever possible. But make sure you stick around those people with certainty. So find certainty within the thing you do, and certainty leads to awareness, leads to certainty, which leads to influence. There is from a communication standpoint, there is almost telepathic, to get really woo-woo on you, power that people have when they really are so certain in their principles. People can tell. It's like you can tell when someone is efficient at the thing just telepathically almost, just being in their presence. They have their presence, and that's the type of doctor you want to be, because most people are looking for safety and they're looking for security, and by being certain in your principles, by being certain in your technique, being certain of the thing you're doing, that in itself is a form of communication. So that's number 2. Number 3, without a doubt, I think it's our secret weapon within chiropractic, and we don't use it enough. The secret weapon is this. It's empathy. Empathy. We have energy, we have certainty, and we have empathy. And those 3 things communicate more than you could ever learn on any skill set on how to communicate with regards to scripts and procedures and techniques. And those things are very important. Those things are very, very important. But I tell you right now that I have worked with some docs who have, in many ways, are socially inept, but they are oozing empathy, and they were some of the busiest, most influential docs I've ever worked with in my entire life. I believe the saying is, nobody really cares until you let them know how much you care. So empathy is a massive part of the whole process. Those are my first points with regards to you working on yourself so you can better communicate. Without a doubt, that's the biggest skill set. I mean, I can give you techniques and I give you templates and I give you all those things, but without energy, without certainty, without empathy, it's very difficult to have the impact that we want. And that's the point of this. Communication is about impacting lives, making a difference in your communities. That's the major difference between someone that just is a speaker and someone that's a trainer. You want to be a trainer. You want to help move people towards the truth wherever possible. A little tip on that, they say the truth will set you free, but often first it will agitate you. So as the communicator, be ready for that at times. People aren't always ready to receive the truth. The next part of the process when it comes to communication is that the receiver must be paying attention. The easiest way I can put this to you is, there is a famous saying that says it's not what you say, it is how you say it. Way too many people are concerned about what they say. While important, I'm going to tell you something right now that always surprises a few people. It's way more important how you say it as opposed to what you say. Listen, you are watching this right now. You more than likely have studied for many, many, many years to be where you are. Trust me right now, you have more knowledge in you than you've forgotten more than 99% of people on the planet know. It's not about the content, it's about the context with which you say it. So give thought to the surroundings with which you communicate. Now, there's 2 contexts of that, because now the whole world has moved digital. You've got communications with your patients in front of you. give thought to the surroundings. Sometimes when I work with docs, I will often go and look at their room that they do the report of findings. And without doubt, normally, the easiest thing I can do is just clean the room up. It sounds small. Or the easiest thing I can do is change the environment with which they're doing the report of findings, and often their results improve. Isn't that interesting? Nothing really changed besides the surroundings of the environment. It's the same with the way that you communicate. So we're living in an environment right now where you have multiple types of media that you need to be able to communicate with. And I'm going to get to that in a moment. But the surroundings with which you invite and controlling those surroundings will make a huge difference to the receiver actually receiving the information. Number 3 is the receiver must have an understanding of the information. So this is the difference between talking to someone and helping them facilitate or drawing the genius out of them. If you look at the origins or the etymology of the word to educate, we're often told within chiropractic that we need to educate our patients. And the word educate, often, if you look at the etymology of the word, it comes from the Latin word to educe, which means to draw out. Now, when I see someone educating, most of the time all they're doing is trying to shove in. That's not your job. Remember that genius lives within all of us. You're not trying to shove, innate. The mere definition of innate means from inside out. So the genius lives within each of us. Our job as communicators is to pull it out. So from a communication standpoint, I'll give you one little tip. There's an old saying that says you have to, or a study that was once created, that someone needs to hear something 7 times before they get it. I want to tell you that study is wrong. Why am I telling you it's wrong? It's because today we have more information than we've ever had in the history of mankind. We have more media with which we get it. We have Instagram, we have Facebook, we have traditional media, we have TV, radio, we have print, we have telephone, text, etc. So actually studies now show that someone needs to at least consume your content 21 plus times before they actually become to know, like, and trust you. The times have changed. You better move with the times. Which really moves me to my biggest piece of advice for you, given these times. Here's my advice, is that when you're communicating with someone, I'm going to give you points that I think are relevant for today when it comes to communication, because my whole presentation has changed with everything going on at the moment. Number 1, let me tell you this, is that Oliver Wendell Holmes said this: a mind that is stretched by a new experience can never go back to its old dimensions. Sometimes when you're communicating with someone, while we want the receiver to understand it, you've got to tell them what you're going to tell them. You're going to tell them, and you've got to tell them what you told them. Let me say that again. To at least have any chance these days with as many communications going on, you've got to tell someone what you're going to tell them. You've got to tell them what you're going to tell them, what you're going to tell them, and you've got to tell them what you told them. But even when you have all the best communication skills on the planet in your favor, sometimes the receiver is not always ready to hear it. But I want you to understand this, is that it's impossible, if you communicate effectively, for that message not to have an impact on that person, if done effectively, if done towards the truth. Because a mind that is stretched by a new experience can never go back to its old dimensions. And that's really what effective communication is. It's not about being less attached to the results. And I work with so many docs. I help people, speak on stage. I help people do lunch and learns. I help them do that stuff, and they're sometimes way too attached to the end result. Remember, your job is you're the messenger, and sometimes the receiver's not always ready to receive that message. But as long as you stay within your truth, you'll still create an impact, even if they're not ready, if you give it time. That's like a seed germinating over time. So I have 6 points for you. 6 points for you of what I truly believe is practical applications for now. Things that you should absolutely be focused on right now to have impact. And my presentation has changed dramatically from, as I say, when I decided what I was going to talk about live with you, to the whole world changing with COVID-19. So number 1, I'm going to tell you right now, it's more important than ever to be omnipresent. Omnipresent. The definition of omnipresent is that you are everywhere. Number 2 is it's more important than ever to use information. I'm going to get back to omnipresence now. Use information as a bridge. Because so much is happening virtually these days, I want to give you a statistic. 9 times out of 10, someone is not ready to use your product or service when they first communicate with you. 9 times out of 10. Often they will need information first. And the best patient, the best client, the best practice member is always someone that's been consuming your content over a period of time. Which brings me to number 3. If you provide information first through your YouTube channel, through your book, by the way, you should all have a YouTube channel, you should all have a book, you should all be communicating in print, in text, in email, whatever you can do to be omnipresent. If you do that effectively, number 3 is you need to slow down the process. We live in a society right now where everyone's looking to convert, everyone's looking for the sale, everyone's looking, if you change that environment and you be the person that is there to educate, to draw out the genius within all of us or in your communities, you'll find that people naturally gravitate towards you. More importantly, you'll find the people that you want to work with gravitate towards you. But it starts with the intention to be omnipresent first by adding information first. So I could give you an entire presentation just on this, but here's my piece of advice. Wherever you are a published author, you are naturally perceived as the expert and people gravitate towards you. Here's the interesting stat. If you do not offer information first, if you do not have a clear, whether it's your YouTube channel, whether it's the book, whether it's whatever it is, people will often want information before they do business with you. What's interesting though, if you offer the information first via educational media in some way, shape or form, they will often skip the information altogether and go straight to the product or service. Isn't that an interesting fact? Which means that you just have to be the person that's prepared to provide the information. Number 4, video is no longer a luxury. Meaning that what happens these days is someone will search for you. If you do not have the YouTube channel, if you do not produce video, if you do not have a video on your website these days or producing video, you become irrelevant. What's interesting about that is it goes back to point number 3. It doesn't even mean that they fully engage with your video content. While it's helpful, the best type of patient is someone that's been watching your content on Facebook, YouTube, or wherever it is for 3 to 6 months prior to coming to see you. That changes the environment or the selling environment before you ever speak to them. So that's a very important concept to understand, is that you will automatically stand out if you are at least a producer of content. Most chiropractors, most human beings really struggle with the concept of standing in front of a camera and speaking like this. I mean, even this right now, I'm standing in a room all by myself speaking. But you have to understand, if you are the person that is able to tame that fear, you automatically put yourself in a leadership position. And you know what? Your community wants to be led. Your community wants a leader. People don't come to you for any other reason, really. I want to go to an expert that's a leader. And by producing a ton of content, you immediately become that leader in the marketplace. So that's number 4. Number 5, you need to also consider, while video is important and it's a must, you got to have it, you also got to remember that every Tom, Dick, and Harry has a video platform these days. While it's important to have, if you really want impact, you also got to think about showing up where people aren't showing up. So where do people stop showing up these days? And that's in print. And people have got bored of that stuff, and newsletters and emails and texts. People, everyone's obsessed with the shiny object. So my next piece of advice for you is think about showing up where nobody else is showing up, as well as it's an and conversation. The challenge we have is not, we always think about all conversations. Is it video or this? Is it this or this? And it's never or, it's an and conversation. You have to find a way to make it an and conversation. So give thought to the process of showing up where other people aren't showing up. And I highly recommend that print is one of the golden opportunities you have. Old school print. We do newsletters, we do welcome packs, we do all those things because I know that I want to show up where everyone else isn't showing up, and I also want to be omnipresent. And lastly, number 6, if you really want to make an impact in today's world, it's not good enough to just have a video platform. It's not good enough to just have one platform. You absolutely these days need to be multimedia, which means somebody's going to be intimidated by the following statement. But you have to show up in as many media as possible, because remember, it's never about us. It's always about the consumer. It's always about the person's life we're trying to influence. And while some of us might respond really well to video, others might respond really well to a podcast, and others might respond terribly to both of those, but respond really well to email and print media. So you absolutely need to be multimedia in your communication channels. I'm going to leave you with one thought process, and that is that there's nothing new in the world. If you did yourself a massive favor and you studied what I truly believe is the most influential chiropractor in the history of mankind, be Mr. BJ Palmer, if you actually study his marketing methods, if you study his communication methods, one thing you know, I've just recently read a book about Mr. BJ Palmer, and within the book they talk about how he became a very skilled orator. Make sure you become a skilled orator. They also spoke about how he had a printing press. I just spoke about print being very important. Make sure you have a printing press, or make sure you have a printing avenue or arm to your marketing department. He also was only the second licensed radio station in the whole United States, second ever. Make sure that you are being heard. Today it's podcasts, etc. But should you be focusing on traditional media? Absolutely, you should be focusing on traditional media. Guess what else Mr. BJ Palmer did? He did the Lyceum conferences, right? Many years ago. There are records of over 8,000 people attending those, and those were not just for chiropractors, they were for lay people too. So he communicated at a large level. But if you really study what he did, he was a genius in the way he did it. But there was deep thought into being those points I've just said. He was always omnipresent. He had brochures and books. I mean, think how many books he's got. Point 2 is have information first. Point 3, slow down the process. He wanted people to hear him on radio, see his print, see him in newspapers, way before they come to see him. Point 4 is video is no longer nice to have, it's a necessity. But in those days, they didn't have those processes, but they did have radio. So guess what he did? He made sure he was on voice. Point 5 is show up where others aren't. He just showed up everywhere. Remember, he at one point owned the world record, or the Guinness record, for the longest elephant cart-drawn carriage, and was really that he put on a big show and people were able to follow him, and he created a movement and he created something different. So he was a genius with what he did. And lastly, he was always multimedia. So you don't really have to look too far from those around us or our forefathers, because we get to stand on the shoulders of giants. So I hope this was helpful today, and I want you to understand that if I go back to the very beginning of my presentation, is that people will pay to watch a fire burn bright. Start with yourself first, do the work, become on purpose, on fire, and that's half the communication battle won. My name is Dr. Ryan Rieder. Please look me up online. I'm always here to help you anytime, and I hope one day I get to see you live and communicate live with you. Keep on serving big, make an impact. The planet needs you now more than it's ever needed you, and that is our responsibility to step up and communicate at a larger level. Love and appreciate you.